my name is Patrick Nyland. I'm an aspiring sci-fi author, and this is week 9 of the road to publishing my first book. And this is a writing vlog that I've been excited about for a while now. Should I really call this a writing vlog? I'm not really writing anything. I guess it counts. This week, I'm designing a space station for my work in progress Operation Ark. While I was writing the first draft for Operation Ark, I realized I did not have a really good idea in my head of what I wanted the Arks to look like. So with 2 more weeks before I can finally edit this draft, I think now is a perfect time to really design this space station. So I've designed spaceships and space stations for other projects before, but this is a little different because I've never really designed one that's kind of meant to be something that you can kind of foresee happening in the near future. While Operation Ark does take place in the future, it doesn't take place in the distant future. It more takes place in like the 2050s type future. And while there is a technological jump, there isn't a huge technological jump for what we have today. I mean, it is a decent jump, but it's not a warp drive shield generator type jump. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. In all honesty, I'm probably about to do hours and hours of research to maybe change 2 or 3 lines of my draft. Yeah, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, what an arc looks like really doesn't matter, at least that much. But it matters to me, and this will help me paint a better picture in my head. Also, designing space stations is just so much fun. As much as I want to jump right into research and sketching spaceships, the first thing I really need to do is really define the objectives of an arc. For this, I basically want to make a list of requirements that the developers of the arcs in the story would have. One of the reasons I'm coming up with this list is so I can kind of put myself in the heads of the engineers of these arcs to really get an understanding of what the major problems would be. Before even really getting into designing the arcs, one of the major questions I already have is how the hell are they going to get launched into space? This is a really good idea to think about before I start sketching out designs. Creating this list of objectives for an arc also helps me stay on track. As fun as it would be to start designing weapon systems for these arcs, that would be pretty far off topic of the purpose of the arcs, which is to preserve human life. Well, technically the purpose is to conduct genetic tests on human life, but you get the idea. Anyway, I'm going to get working on this list of requirements or objectives for an arc, and I'll show you what I come up with. Alright, so I came up with a pretty decent list of requirements for an arc. It is by no means perfect, but for my purposes today, this will definitely get the job done. So most importantly, I have here that all arcs must be self-sustaining. That's completely essential because in this story, Earth is pretty much gone. Self-sustainability is the main purpose of the arcs. Therefore, one of the top priorities I have here is life support. Some of the subcategories I have under life support are food, water, air, waste, medical, power, radiation shielding, and gravity. Thinking about the gravity requirement, one thing I wonder now is if plants need gravity to grow. That's going to be an interesting search for sure. Another thing that's going to be pretty interesting to look into is for power. Obviously, solar makes a ton of sense. You're in space, the sun's right there. I'm pretty sure solar power is actually a lot more powerful in space, but I'm not sure. Do not quote me in any research papers. But I'm kind of wondering now if maybe solar is impractical for the scope of a space station I'm building here. I wonder if maybe nuclear power would make more sense here. But then with nuclear power, I don't know if that's something you can sustain for like thousands of years without getting new shipments from planet Earth. The second major category I have here is modularity. The idea of these arcs launching as one giant unit is really impractical, at least from my understanding. Instead, what I feel like makes a lot more sense is if these arcs were launched up in parts and then assembled in space. Once again, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that's actually how we built the International Space Station. Also, with this modularity category, I think it's very important that these arcs are also very cheap. Maybe in some cases, even too cheap. In this series of short stories I'm writing, there are over 100 arcs. For that to be practical, these have to be very cheap to make. I've actually written a story or two kind of giving some hints on how these arcs have been funded. I can't get into it right now because it's kind of a spoiler, but still, they have to be cheap. Maybe cheap's the wrong word. They have to be efficient. I like efficient. The third category I have here is motion. That's actually pretty standard. You have over 100 of these going around Earth. You want to make sure that there's no chance of a collision. This one's actually pretty simple because the thrust in them doesn't actually have to be that powerful. Once the arcs are built, they're not really going anywhere. They're just orbiting around the Earth. So the thrust they have can be slow. It's just meant to keep them on their orbital path. You know, you wouldn't want 2 of these space stations colliding. Or would you? Yes, this is me practicing my signature, by the way. The fourth category I have here is ideal for experimentation. The key here is having the design for the arcs being easily modifiable. You know, that way you can change a variable here, add a part there. And then the fifth and final major category I have here is the mission. And this mainly includes things like ship hangars, so that when the Earth is finally habitable again, people from the Arks can go down and repopulate it. Now that that's done, I want to make a list of parts for the space station and kind of go through specifications for each one. I know this process might sound a little exhausting to you, but believe me, I am having a blast right now. So I've come up with some main components for the space station, starting with habitation rings. Or should I say a singular habitation ring? Before going in and doing all this research, I was picturing a massive space station that had a small part of it devoted to habitation rings. Something kind of like this, with these being the rings. I know this looks like absolute crap, but this is a quick sketch of what I'm talking about. But after doing some math and research of my own, I'm realizing it actually might be more practical to have all the components of an arc kind of surrounding a spherical shape. Like, instead of the ring being an attachment, the ring is kind of like the center of the whole thing. But yeah, basically come up with dimensions for the ring. So I'm thinking 200 meters around and then 25 meters wide, something like that. This will make it so that the ring has to rotate around the axis 2 times per minute about. The whole purpose of these rings rotating, by the way, is to produce artificial gravity using centrifugal acceleration. I don't know if I made that clear before. I don't want to make this a physics lesson, but basically, if you have a ring in space and it's rotating, you'll have gravity pushing against the edge of the ring. That was a terrible demonstration, but that's the general concept. With these habitation rings, I figure it also makes sense to have the hangar in the center. That way, the shuttle with the residents lands in the hangar, and then from there can be an elevator into the actual ring for the people to go into. It makes sense. At least in my head, it makes sense. This might be complete gibberish to you. For the space station's power, I have a nuclear reactor here and fuel storage. After doing some research, while it would be dangerous to have on board, the fuel for a nuclear reactor actually would be really compact. Even for a mission designed to take thousands of years, this would not take that much storage. I mean, it might blow up, but I feel like that's not something that the creators of the arcs in this story would really have a problem with. I mean, if you're building over 100 arcs, some of them are expendable, right? I also wrote here that the space station will be using electronic propulsion, which is really ideal for limiting the amount of fuel the space station has to have. I've also added solar panels here, maybe as like a backup power source. For food, vertical farms are very effective. They're actually so effective that they're going to take a lot less space than I initially thought they would. When I made this terrible design, I was really thinking that a huge block portion of this space station would be dedicated to food output. The truth is, though, with the efficiency of vertical farming, all the food the residents could possibly need could actually be created in a smaller ring in the inside of the habitation ring, which is really what opened my eyes to the fact that the habitation ring can really be the center of the space station rather than having a big extruding part that also has a ring around it. I doubt that made any sense, but I'm going to move on. I really hope my drawings of the space station at the end of the video make this make a little more sense, but probably not because I'm a terrible artist. Like, absolutely terrible. Finally, I looked into it, and it's actually practical to have a cultured meat plant where meat is grown on the space station. Like a cell colony steak. That sounds really weird, but I guess it's better than no steak. Now that I've made this disaster of a list, I'm gonna get drawing. Brace yourself. So throughout this process, I've been asking ChatGPT questions on what a space station would need and what dimensions would make sense, and having it help me do calculations, because while I could calculate the area of a space station, that seems like a lot of time that I don't want to waste. And since I was already using AI, and this is a sci-fi project, I thought it'd be pretty cool to take what ChatGPT wrote about the space station and put it into an AI art generator to see what it would design for the space station. Note, I'm only using these AI images for inspiration. I would never take them and slap them on a cover. And to be honest, they're all flawed in one way or another. They'd be so much higher quality if they were created by an actual artist. Of the images that were generated, I would definitely say that this one was the closest to what I was looking for. I also thought this image was very interesting. I can definitely envision the arcs looking something like this. I also like this one, even though it's flawed in a few ways, because it shows you what multiple rings would look like together. As fun as it's going to be to draw the exterior of the space station, I'm going to do that. I first think it's important for me to make a map of the inner ring of the space station, like a map with a layout of where everything is going to be. And the reason I think that's going to be the most useful to me when I'm actually writing is because the entire story is taking place on the interior of the space station, at least for the most part. Having a better idea of what this layout looks like is going to really help me describe scenes. And it's going to help me get a much better sense of what day-to-day life in an arc looks like. I'm going to get right into it. So this is the basic map of the inside of an Ark habitation ring that I came up with. I didn't really express it well on the map, but since this is a ring, you could basically just walk down the corridor forever and forever without stopping. Over here, I have the family units that in my head can host up to 8 people. And then here I have the necessities and then a couple amenities so that people don't blow their brains out a year into this mission. I also included a bridge because if there are multiple rings, you need a bridge to traverse between them. Now that I have this map, it's just so apparent how cramped living one of these arcs would be. This also made it clear to me that every little thing you add in this space takes away crucial living space. Also note, this is just a standard ring in the story. Not all the rings are going to be exactly like this. Some of the experiments might require different layouts, but this is a pretty good standard. Now it's time for me to butcher what the space station looks like from the outside. I mean, what did you honestly expect? I always talk about how I'm a terrible artist. That being said, I actually am very satisfied with how this came out because it helps me picture an arc better. Remember, the goal in all this is not drawing pretty pictures, it's to improve my understanding of what an arc looks like for my next draft. The external ring is the habitation ring. That's the exterior of the map I just showed before. The circular thing attached to it is a thruster. The inner ring serves as a vertical farm. What's really cool about the vertical farm ring in this design is since it's attached to the habitation ring, it's still rotating, but because it's closer to the center axis, it's getting less gravity than the habitation ring is getting. And that's perfectly fine because that lower gravity is going to have less of an effect on plants than it would on humans. And then this is my current design for what I think a full arc with 3 rings would look like. Where my head's at now, this rocket ship component will basically dock into the holes of the rings. This rocket is also going to be the rocket that actually brings the passengers from Earth to space. And it's going to be the component of an Ark that houses the nuclear reactor. Now, the reason I clarify that the rocket is going to be the part that brings the passengers up is because I'm not viewing this as one big unit. With my limited understanding of space travel and our current rocket technology, it seems impractical that these rings would be launched from Earth. Instead, I'm picturing the ring portion of an Ark actually being built in space. When the time comes and Earth is no longer suffering from a nuclear winter, the passengers of the Ark will return to the planet on this return capsule. This capsule will have everything the survivors need to create a thriving new society. At least that's what they were told when they got into the Arks. I find this rocket and this return capsule to be 2 realistic ways to get from and back to Earth. While the ring portion of the design is futuristic technology, the rocket really grounds it in reality, in my opinion. It's not sleek or pretty by any means, but that's what makes it feel more real for me. Finally, I included a hangar bay for shuttles. These shuttles will be for making repairs on an Ark or venturing to other Arks, but they will not be capable of returning to Earth. I never really know what to expect whenever I do one of these brainstorming / design sessions for a book. Sometimes they can be super helpful, and other times they're a complete waste of time. This session, though, has been extremely helpful. Way more helpful than I thought I was going to be going into this. This map in particular is making my idea of an Ark in my head so much more clear than it was before. Sure, I was sort of picturing the inside of the Ark in my head before, but now it's just so much more clear. And these have also helped just make this idea feel more real. Also, just creating these drawings, I've gained a ton of writing inspiration. Which kinda sucks because I'm not supposed to open the document for Operation Ark for another 2 weeks. Maybe I'll take that inspiration and work it towards continuing to refine these drawings. After all, just like how my current document is draft 1 of what Operation Ark is going to become, these are really just the first draft of what the Arks are going to look like. I will say though, it's a very solid first draft. If you have any questions about the Ark I designed in this video, be sure to ask me in the comments. If it's not a major spoiler, I'll be sure to answer. Also, if you notice a mistake in any of my designs or you think there's something I didn't really consider, be sure to let me know. It'd be so much better to find out now than after I publish this book. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did and you haven't already, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. See you Sunday. I know for the past 2 weeks I've been posting the vlogs for the road to publishing my first book on Wednesday. That's just a scheduling issue that started my vacation and it carried on to the next week. The next episode of the road to publishing my first book will be out this Sunday. I was doing so well keeping the schedule, I want to get back to that. But yeah, see you then.